Mel Kiper. So he is always fun to listen to. There's definitely different types of draft analysts to listen to. Some guys are just like so into the weeds that they're better in written form. And then there's some guys that can translate it to video. And Mel Kiper has obviously been doing this for decades, so he can translate it. And he was on with the guys at the Lounge, the Ravens official podcast. And I thought it was interesting, Bobby, because we have seen that Mel Kiper continues to put Malachi Starks as his projected pick for the Ravens. And I've been curious why he keeps sticking to that, right? Because all we do is have write-ups. We're not really getting the full explanation. And I was even more curious because the first question that they posed to Mel Kiper was, what do the Ravens need to get over the hump, right? They're knocking on the door, a Super Bowl door. The last 2 years, anytime Lamar finishes the season healthy, that's their aspirations. And so they ask him, like, what's it going to take to find what position, what player will help them get over the hump? And Mel says, oh, pass rusher. And he talks about how the Ravens, with the offense, they play with the lead the vast majority of the time. And so he says that you got to have a defense that's going to close things out. Like, you got to finish the job. And he said the best way you can do that is with a pass rusher that can get to the quarterback. So I'm like, why is this guy so high on Malachi Starks then? Why does he continue to push him when there could be other pass rushers there? And so he gave his answer to that. And it was convincing, Bobby. I felt like it was pretty convincing. Here's what he had to say about Malachi Starks.
I love guys that have great football IQ. Those are smart football players. Those are versatile football players, but just ballers. And Malachi Starks, to me, this past year, they moved him around. I mean, when you can just focus on one spot and one role, and he can wear a lot of hats. There's no doubt about that. But the range he shows, the ability of the tackling ability, which some people question this year, he didn't have the best year he could have had. He did not have the year he had 2 years ago. But he didn't have the interception until he had the great interception against Clemson. He didn't have that. So his career total would have been a lot higher had he had more opportunities this year. But, yeah, they were moving him around. So at the end of the day, Malachi Starks, to me, you have to go back to 2023. And if you did, going into the year, guys, I had him as the 7th or 8th best player in the draft.
Wow.
And I always try to go back to that. I always try to go back to early August, mid-August, when those ratings boards start to come out and become formulated, and I finalize my opinions going into the year. Malachi Starks was right there. And as like I say, one of the top 6, 7, 8 best players in this draft. So when you start talking about him in the late 20s, where the Ravens are picking, we talk about value in the draft. How do you get value? You get value either by a guy being injured, banged up, and prevented him from playing to the level of his talent, or he was misused, talent around him wasn't the same. For whatever reason, it just didn't click. It just didn't work to the level it did the previous year. In Malachi Starks' case, that was what happened. So now you can benefit from that. You don't get great value picks because the guy played great. You get great value picks because there's a question. Something went awry, whether it was injury, not playing up to the level expected, whatever. And so for Malachi Starks, if he's there at the end of the first round, I'll forget pass rusher. I would take Malachi Starks.
Bobby ranked as the 7th best player. That's where he had him. And he dropped, and he said that the interceptions, it wasn't as much because they moved him around a ton, right? And we've seen that with Kyle Hamilton here in Baltimore and the different impacts he can make from certain places on the field, but they move him around. And so he's saying, don't look at those stats and say, oh, well, he must have had a down year. He's like, no, if you watch the tape, if you watch these games, you know why the numbers went down. He didn't have the same opportunities that he had in 2023 when he had 3 interceptions. And so I just thought it was interesting. He answered the question I would have had when he said, oh, you got to get a pass rusher. But then he's like, but if you get my 7th or 8th ranked player all the way at 27 compared to the pass rushers that'll be there, he said, forget pass rusher and go with Malachi Starks. He's better than what people are saying, according to Mel.
One of 3 safeties that we've covered on this program as we're following the mock drafts that start to come in and that have been coming in now for weeks. The other 2, Nick Emanwari from South Carolina and Kyle Hamilton's former teammate for a cup of coffee at Notre Dame, Xavier Watts, before he left for, of course, the NFL. So I know I made a little gut reaction comment last week that I'm feeling more and more like it's going to be safety. That means they'll go guard.
Yeah.
They're going to go guard. but that's that. Now, what was funny is, to your point there a minute ago, he started off the interview with saying, hey, what's going to get them over the hump is pressure and edge rushers or an edge rusher in the opening round. But then that transition did. But if Malachi's there, you got to take Starks. And then he went on to, you just heard what he had to say. Well, let's go back to the edge rusher conversation, because later on in the interview, the guys either asked specifically about this player or he brought up the player himself.
No, they asked specifically about, you're talking about Sheamar Stewart?
We've spoken a lot about Sheamar Stewart, going all the way back to the combine. When Chris Sims came on this show and talked about the F the play up statistic that isn't one, which is the exact reason why he would take a flyer on Sheamar Stewart, because while the sacks and the production certainly were not there, he does have game-wrecking ability. He does have, I'm sure there's defensive line coaches out there, outside linebackers coach like a Chuck Smith, that see him as untapped potential. But Mel, much like he was with Starks, did not hold back whatsoever with his opinion on the Texas A&M pass rusher, Sheamar Stewart, who has been mocked to Baltimore, but it's been probably over a month since there was legitimate buzz surrounding this conversation. So here's Mel on Sheamar.
I do not think they would take Sheamar Stewart. To answer your question, Ryan, no, I don't think Sheamar Stewart will be a Raven. It's just because of the fact that when you watch him, I didn't see the disruptive plays. I didn't see him beating a guy initially that he should have. I call him AOG. I kind of coined that phrase. You know what it stands for, right? Another occupation guy. That's AOG. So most of the guys you play against in college, I call them AOGs. Yeah. And if you can't beat them, you're playing against the best in the world when you get to the NFL on a play-by-play basis, even if it's a backup. These are the best in the world playing in the NFL. These are AOGs, okay? So if you can't beat them, all of a sudden it's going to click in the NFL. So to answer your question, I think Sheamar Stewart, a defensive line coach will probably fight for him, say, I can take him. I can make him. If you're taking him in the first round, you better be thinking 10 to 12 sacks a year. That's what I always finally got to that point this year, right? You got to be thinking first round pass rusher, I got to be getting double-digit sacks out of this guy. If I can't get that, am I going to take him? Look at Trey Hendrickson. What's he getting, 17 a year? He was a third-round draft choice. Right. So now Daniil Hunter didn't have many sacks at LSU. He's got 99 career sacks now. He was a fourth-round pick. So you have had outliers that have not had great sack production in college that have gone on to do it, but they're outliers. And Bill Polian told me and screamed at me, you don't draft outliers. Okay? If we have a range on a wide 9 that says a wide 9 has got to be 4.65 or better, we can't draft a guy at 4.71 for a 40. Right. Can't do it. So you got what's it take, guys, to be able to do? You got to have discipline. Part of being a great evaluator is being disciplined in your approach and not letting something happen and say, well, I'm going to make an exception to the rule. I'm going to do something away from what I normally would do, and I'm going to take a shot on this guy. Well, I guess you could do it once in a while. Can't make a living doing that. So if teams that say, hey, production, the final 7 games of the last 3 years at Texas A&M, he did not record a sack. That's the final 7 games of 3 straight years. 1.5. 3 years ago, 1.5. 2 years ago, 1.5 this year. That's 4.5 sacks in his career. Those guys had 4.5 sacks in a game this year. I couldn't do it myself. He's graded at a point where I have him on the board, that 25 to 28 area that I know he's going to go higher. And I've always believed if you're picking where the Ravens are, you got to get a guy on your board that's in the top 15. It's going to work that way. You're going to get a guy that's on your board, one of the best 15 players in this draft. It's not going to be Sheamar Stewart. For me, no.
Sarah, you thought that Steve Smith's phrase, jag, just a guy, was good? I think Mel just one-upped him. AOG, another occupation guy, meaning if Sheamar's not dominating AOGs at the collegiate level, good luck when it comes to the NFL. So that's his point, at least when it comes to the late first round. That's what the conversation surrounding for Sheamar.
Ooh, he buried Sheamar. He buried him. And you know what? Mel's been right before. Mel's been wrong before. He could be wrong on Sheamar. But I will say this. The reason why he's on TV is because he sticks his neck out. He sticks his neck out. And he does a lot of studying. and he actually has an opinion. I cannot tell you, Bobby, how many draft conversations I've been listening to trying to get ready for a week from this Thursday. And there's just so many people who it's just like, oh, okay, you gave me his stats, you gave me his, like, what's your opinion? And like, how is he going to project? And just a lot of people don't do it. So Mel may be wrong, but I do appreciate that he pounds the table. He's been pounding it for Malachi. He just buried Sheamar, and maybe he'll be wrong on both guys. Maybe he'll be right on both. Maybe one or the other. But I like that he has an opinion. But yeah, like when he's talking about here, he said the final 7 games, 3 years in a row, no sacks. And I do remember with Odafe Owe, people were saying, well, he beats his guy. He just has to finish. And that has been true in the NFL, where we'd see him be like, he would get off, he'd beat somebody, just like, wow. And then he's right there and he doesn't finish. And that continued all the way up until last year, where he began to finish more, although there were still some plays he left on the field, as everyone does. And so it's interesting because I remember, like you said, about a month ago, people were projecting Sheamar here, and we didn't know anything about him at the time, right? So we're just reading what they say, and they're talking about, oh, he has no production. And we're all like, oh, no, thank you. We have that already in Odafe Owe. And then the combine came around, and in, shorts and a T-shirt, woo-wee, did he look good? He starts going up the draft boards, and now he's starting to settle back again. But, he was also asked about some other pass rushers, Mykel Williams. He brought up Green, but he wasn't so sure that they would be there. But you know what? You know who he did kind of like? And it was the same as Jason Smith from Huddle It Up Films, Donovan Ezeraku. Did I just say that right? Did I get it?
I think so.
I think I got it.
There's been a couple different pronunciations floating around, but yeah, he did go out of his way to bring that name up.
Yeah, he went out of his way. He talked about how much he liked him. Ryan said, do you feel like he's a Raven, though? Because the Ravens usually go after bigger bodies, and he says that's true. That's what the Ravens do, but he's got length. He talks about how Dwight Freeney could beat Jonathan Ogden back in the day when he wasn't a big size, but he had bend, he had long arms, all that kind of stuff. And so he's like, somebody's going to get him, in that, maybe late first round or early second. He's like, I don't know why he's not being talked about like the Mykel Williams or the Sheamar Stewarts or the Greens of the world. He's like, and so it's just interesting because Jason Smith we had on, he was Donovan was his positional favorite, and here's Mel Kiper bringing him up while just completely burying Sheamar Stewart.
All right, how about we do this? There's one more clip of Mel Kiper, which is really good, I think, when it comes to this Shadour Sanders conversation. But before we do, here's some food for thought, some statistical food for thought on the conversation that we were just having when it comes to limited production at the collegiate level and trying to project how that translates to the NFL level. What I have in front of me is a couple different things. Odafe Owe's collegiate stats versus his NFL stats, and I have Sheamar's just as a reminder, even though we just heard from Mel. Sheamar at Texas A&M over 3 seasons had 4.5 total sacks in 37 games. Okay? 37 games, 4.5 total sacks. Odafe Owe in 24 games over 3 seasons at Penn State had 7. Okay? We know what Odafe's turned into. He has become, he's a late bloomer, but he's coming off a Pro Bowl caliber type of season. He hit the double-digit category in the sack department for the first time in his career, and it was a big jump. He doubled his total from 2023, and that was after what? In his rookie season, he had 5. His sophomore season at the NFL level, he had 3, then went to 5 in 23, and then skyrocketed to 10 this past season. So,
and just to add to that context, Donovan Ezeraku had 16.5 last year.
There you go.
Last year. He had another, let's see, 7, 9.5, add another 11.5 his other 3 years.
Yeah. Look, I'm not advocating.
Talk to me about size. Talk to me about what he does on Sundays or Saturdays in the case of when he was at BC.
In no way am I advocating for the Sheamar Stewart experiment at 27. Just giving some context. I'm really talking to the live chat right now. Yeah. Giving some context to what Adafe's the different players, different programs, different body types, so on and so forth. But Adafe's taken 4 years to get to the point where he can be referred to as a double-digit sack guy that still you're kind of left wanting more, but that they did exercise the fifth-year option, and clearly they felt compelled enough to invest that kind of money in him. So now that could be more of that could be more related to what the market as a whole is, because we know the outside linebacker pass rusher market is through the roof, especially for guys that are above Odafe Owe's caliber. So anyway, just some food for thought there when it comes to the Sheamar conversation. Do you have anything else before we get to the last clip?
Yeah, just a little bit more if I can find it. Just a little bit more on this idea of like production versus projection, all that kind of stuff. I remember Matt Judon coming out of Grand Valley State, and he had just gobs and gobs of sacks. I'm trying to see if I can find it here. Okay, here we go. And people are like, oh, whatever, he was at a small school, but production is something. So at Grand Valley State University, which is not even Boston College, which is where Donovan's coming out of, he finished with he was the school's all-time leader with 35 sacks. 35 sacks. And so Donovan was 16 and a half, and then 11 and a half puts him not quite at 35, but he's like getting close to 30 at tougher competition than what. So, production does mean something, even if you're coming from smaller schools.
Sure. Good stuff. Good conversation. We got one more clip to put a bow on the Mel Kiper conversation before we get to some prospect visits that we've been seeing reports on. And this one has to do about Shadour Sanders and potentially being, I think he's going to be the most compelling story to watch going into opening night, not just because he's a quarterback, but because of what's taken place just in recent weeks with the Giants seemingly filling up their room. And then just over the weekend, Sarah, Derek Carr had some news. He is now in jeopardy of missing all of next season for New Orleans. He has a shoulder injury that, as Ian Rappaport noted, threatens his availability for the season. He's currently weighing his options, including the possibility of surgery. So New Orleans right now is at 9.
I was going to say
is at 21. Yeah. Mel Kiper floated the idea of him potentially, and maybe it wasn't on the top of his mind that Derek has this potential looming surgery, but he does not like the idea of Shadour Sanders potentially falling to 21. Here's why.
Sitting here in Baltimore, I'm a Raven fan. You're all Raven fans. Love the Ravens, right? Do we want Shadour Sanders in Pittsburgh? I don't. Okay, because Shador's a winner, and he will find a way to get the ball to those receivers. This notion you can't play in Pittsburgh if you're Shadour. Well, Brady played in New England and didn't have the great arm and didn't have any speed. Brady ran a 5.2 4.40 and had 24 vertical. That's the worst vertical and the worst 40 of any quarterback I've ever evaluated. Okay, you talk about where we are right now in terms of Shadour Sanders. Could he be there with the Pittsburgh Steelers pick at 21? Could he fall in their lap? Ben Roethlisberger fell in their lap after Rivers and Eli went early, right? Mm-hmm. Look how that worked out. Ben Roethlisberger fell in their lap. Will same thing happen with Shadour Sanders? I don't think they'll take Jackson Dart. If Shador's gone, I've been told not for Jackson Dart because it may be a little too much Kenny Pickett there, right? Not enough upside, whatever you want to talk about there. Mm-hmm. I don't think Tyler Shuck's going that high either. I don't think it'll be Jalen Milroe necessarily, but Jalen Milroe's intriguing. If he can fix that accuracy, you got a special player.
So if we're watching the draft on the first night, and you hear Shadour Sanders go in the top 10, one of those teams takes him early, we're going to get a big round of applause from you on the ESPN desk there?
Well, I'll be very, very satisfied that it's not going to impact the Ravens negatively, and the Steelers won't get the quarterback I would think they would want to see slide down that far. I don't have a problem with Tyler Shuck going there. Don't have a problem with Jackson Dart going there. Wouldn't have a problem with Jalen Milroe going there. But I don't want to see Shadour in a Pittsburgh Steelers uniform. And that could happen. That'll be our worst nightmare if that starts to happen. Maybe somebody will try to jump ahead of them and grab them. I don't know. I don't know what New Orleans is going to do at 9. They could take him. They could take Dart. They could not even take a quarterback. Okay? There are some that think they're not going to go quarterback. That's not going to happen. I think they could. Kellen Moore handpick his quarterback. If he likes one of the two, take him. We'll see. Shadour's not probably going to go to the Giants. We know that now, right? He's not going anywhere past New Orleans. Where's he going to go? Then you get into no man's land. If it's not the Steelers, the Rams, now I keep hearing maybe the Rams won't take a quarterback. Will somebody else trade back in? Well, you know what happens here. Now, Pittsburgh doesn't get a quarterback. Pittsburgh has no 2. That's going to be the story of the first round. Aaron Rodgers started to slide, and Green Bay just waited it out.
Well, I mean, Lamar Jackson. How about Lamar Jackson?
Boomer Esiason, guys, ranked the 3rd best player in the draft my first year at ESPN in 1984. They had 3 picks in the first round, did not take Boomer. They took him in the second round. The 3rd player on the board went in the second round. Favre was 14, went in the second round. Okay? It's happened before. It can happen again. Mm-hmm. So there's a chance that Shadour could be there at 21.
First of all, this is going to annoy you, but Mel's 10 toes down for Shadour's ability to transition to the NFL. Is he not? He's 10 toes. He's 10 toes down. And if he's got 11 of them, it's 11 toes down. Some people have 11 toes. Some people have 9. How about it? You're not seeing that many people stick their neck out there for Shadour Sanders, but Mel is one of them. Yeah. And I think what's important to note here from the Pittsburgh perspective, we've talked about it a little bit in recent weeks, just for their draft strategy. They don't currently have a second rounder because that's what they had to give up in part to get DK via trade. So does that change their plans? Obviously, what's going to change a lot of things is if they ultimately, if or when or whatever, they bring in Aaron Rodgers, either pre or post draft. But you would think, being that Aaron's only looked at as a guy that is a year or 2 away from calling it a career, that don't you have to pick a quarterback at 21 just to at least give yourself the option of not having to go a bridge if Aaron doesn't work out? I mean, that's how I would view it.
Do they have to go quarterback at 21? I don't necessarily think so. I mean, listen, if you miss with your first round pick on a quarterback, it sets you back. And listen, I get it. We've talked about it a million times. The league is divided into 2 types of teams, those with a franchise quarterback and those without. But those without make it a million times worse if they miss when they go after one with the first round pick and then they don't have a second round pick. So you're looking at potentially, say Shadour Sanders is gone. Okay, let's say that he's gone at New Orleans. Or even if he makes it past them, other quarterback needy teams will know what Pittsburgh's doing and will want to jump up ahead of them. So I would be a little surprised. And since they don't have a second round pick, I don't know what kind of ammunition they have to move up. They would have to start using future stuff. I mean, to move up in the first round is expensive. You're probably are going to have to give up a future first rounder to do that. But it sets you back even more for sure. And so you're looking at, do I take a risk with somebody like Dart, or do I take somebody like Mel Kiper has them doing, Harmon, the defensive tackle for the middle of the line? And so it's like, which one is going to give you more franchise stability if you don't believe in these quarterbacks? Like, take a swing just to take a swing. I don't agree.
Well, here's what this is where my mind is. Aaron, as the Jets so painfully learned, can be a play away from potential retirement at this point. At 40 years old, that's just the reality of it. And we're just assuming that Aaron's going to be a Steeler. I don't know why it hasn't happened yet. Maybe it's going to be in 10 days from now, right before the draft. Maybe that gets done. But assuming that Aaron is under center for them, to me, it's like you have no idea where you're going from here. You have Mason Rudolph in that quarterback room. And so, yes, if you're not high on guys outside of Cam Ward and Shadour Sanders, like the Tyler Shucks and the Jackson Darts, right, and the Jalen Milrose, because I think we could probably agree those 3 quarterbacks, probably pretty likely that they're going to be there at 21. Will Shadour be there at 21? That's the big domino that hasn't fallen yet. And maybe, again, with Derek Carr's news, he ends up in New Orleans and this is all a moot point. But man, knowing that Aaron's future is so incredibly uncertain at the age that he is and how different he's looked post Achilles.
Oh, their quarterback situation's bad, no doubt. I'm just saying what you just said of like, oh, you have to go for a quarterback with the first round. I don't agree with that. Not if they don't believe in him. Well, they have a bad quarterback situation, but they could make it worse by adding another bad quarterback instead of, pieces that could be franchise pieces, say like a Hartman along the defensive line.
I get it. It's like at some point, though, you got to give your friggin' fan base and organization some sort of optimism and hope for the future in terms of somebody that you can build around. And if
you don't want to become the Browns, though.
Well,
where you're just swinging to swing.
who wants to become Cleveland? But yeah,
Which is what you're promoting here, just an FYI.
No,
I don't think you are meaning to, but you are.
How? These guys are all projected to be somewhere.
Because you have a bad quarterback situation, you have to use your first round pick on a quarterback. That's what you said. Unless you're taking that back, I agree.
If these three quarterbacks are there, let's say Cam goes 1, Shadour goes 9.
Yeah.
If Milroe, Shuck, and Dart are all on the board, I think they should select one of those three that they're highest on, assuming that they're all on the board at 21. I do. They don't have a second round pick. Rodgers could be done in a year from now. You need some sort of rebuild. You have missed time and time again since Ben Roethlisberger, and your quarterback room currently has a career backup, essentially. You got to go get your guy instead of a bridge the next year if Aaron doesn't work.
Okay, Bobby Cleveland, I'm going to move on. What I also like from Mel, he was like, again, he's not afraid to bury guys or stick his neck out. He's like, I don't want Shadour there. Shuck, I don't mind if Shuck's there. As a Ravens fan, and later we didn't pull this clip, but he was like, I am unabashedly at ESPN pulling for the Ravens week in and week out. So he's talking from a draft guru expert and a Ravens fan expert saying, yeah, Shuck's there. That's cool. Milroe's there. Yeah, that's cool. Dart's there. Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. So anyway.
Does everybody remember or know that Mel went to Calvert Hall, has Baltimore in his blood, and has been a lifelong Ravens fan? Like, if you watch the interview today on the lounge, you know that Johnny Unitas is his all-time quarterback. He rides and dies for the Ravens based on everything that we've been talking about. And I think he lives, I can't remember where he and Mrs. Kiper live, but I think it's just over the bridge. I want to say it's in the Kent Island area. But the best part about Mel is that since COVID happened, the dude just hasn't been in studio. Like, he just has his headquarters in his house. And I think he'll be on site for the draft in Green Bay. But I just love him. He's the draft guru. He's the OG of OGs. I freaking love this guy.
He's fun to listen to. Should we talk draft? Oh, do we have super chats, or should we move on to prospect visits?
Yeah, let's get some super chats in before the prospect visits, if that's cool. And Rave Kingdom restarts us off with I still can't believe you call me Bobby Cleveland.
You are Bobby
Rave.
Cleveland. You're sticking by it too.
You're ridiculous. Rave Kingdom is Rave Cleveland, whatever you want to call it here, because his guy Ben Cleveland is worth a hashtag today and worth $2, and that's what he wrote. That's all, folks.